All right, and just like that, it's 7 o'clock, and we're all here. So thank you guys so much for joining us for episode number 4 here at the Defend Forward webinar series. Tonight we're talking about under fire and threats in the Caribbean. And joining us, of course, is my wonderful co-host, Calnan Weech. And we got the experts, just in case y'all don't believe we know things. We got some experts. We have Joe Viviano from Darktrace and Ricardo Parchment from Fortinet. Yay!
Yes, indeed.
We're all excited, just can't tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I'm gonna say this, and Ricardo, I don't mean anything by this, but I always wanted to play with Darktrace. Like, it's cool. Maybe because I like dark things. They have that whole dark aesthetic, and it look almost like a game. Ricardo can't
Not
nod his
again.
head, Joe, but he knows what I mean. He knows, but because he's from the other people, he can't nod his head. He'd be like,
No, I mean, listen, we don't talk bad about any of our competitors here. I've seen it. It's cool. As you mentioned, I like the dark colors and all of that as well. So one thing
the
I will
aesthetics
stop
were.
you on though, it's definitely not a gift.
Uh,
Yeah.
So tonight we're not selling anybody anything. Just to be clear, this is my disclaimer. However, who better to talk about threats in the Caribbean than people that sell products that deal with threats globally and is used in the Caribbean?
yeah.
So, gents, let's talk about the Caribbean threat landscape for a minute, okay? Because we're going to just jump straight in.
Sure.
How have threats evolved over the last 3 to 5 years? Anyone, if you could take this.
Well, I mean, it that's the thing. There's no constant, right? So whatever we say today, if you look maybe next week, it probably will change in that time, right? Because it's gonna keep changing, and a lot of it is fueled by the constant development, things like AI, and just the fact that it's a spray and pray type of approach now. It's not the same cybersecurity industry that we used to deal with back in the day. It's actually a very sophisticated cybersecurity industry now, and it's like a business, to be honest with you. So you have different, in the same way, think of any organization that you have to deal with. You have like your HR team, you have your middle management, you have the people on the ground doing all of the work, you have the people driving the trucks, and then you have the people at the top, like overseeing the full operation. A lot of criminal organizations and cybercrime actors, that's the structure, right? And thinking, even as I'm explaining this to you right now, I'm thinking back to an article I read. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before that, where they had people that basically they had no idea that they were working for a cybercrime organization because it was that distributed, it was that sophisticated of an operation. They thought they were just software engineers. Nobody ever saw the full package of the code. They were just working on pieces, and they know that they built
Individual.
a piece to do this piece, and they had no idea what the other integrations and the rest of the pipeline looked like. So when eventually, the authorities cracked down on them and they got called in for interviews and arrested and all of these things, they really had no idea what was going on. Yeah.
But that's true because they even have recruitment models that they talk about how they have been using social media and other various platforms to actually recruit people into these crime organizations, these cybercrime organizations now. Some legitimately, like you say, don't know, and then some they tell you that hey, they're offering you X amount of money to actually do stuff for because you work at this company.
For sure, for sure. It's not all the time it's gonna be a situation like that, but I was using that as an example to show you how sophisticated these things are. Because when I heard it blew my mind at the time that, it was at this level. And
All right, Joe, do you want to add to that? I always tell people that, hey, I feel that we've gone from way back and a few years, at least a decade ago, you had to actually know how to do these things. You had to know how to run the code,
Mhm.
but now you can buy tools as a service. Malware as a service
Exactly.
is a big industry now.
Huge.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah, so part of the presentation is going to kind of talk about how hackers are starting to leverage the new LLMs and AI. within their own attacks. But to be quite honest with you, I mean, what I've seen in the region, so I've worked in the Caribbean for maybe 8 years or so. It You don't even necessarily need the AI yet, right? Because they are being successful with more traditional models. As unsexy as it is, still the number one thing that we see is it's phishing emails. Now, admittedly, they're starting to get a lot more sophisticated with those. So we're seeing, I would say, more spear phishing, right? Really targeting, knowing exactly who you should be going after, right? Knowing who actually holds the checkbook. Also a lot of identity attacks. Obviously now not everybody, the vast majority of folks are using different SaaS applications and different cloud solutions. So, obviously the whole pitch of cloud is being able to access it from anywhere, right? And the opposite side of that is obviously a hacker can try to access it from anywhere. So a lot more on the identity side. Um, but yeah, I think as we're just starting to see the beginnings of the AI-based attacks. I won't lie to you, we haven't seen that at a mass scale yet, but I think that's really what we're anticipating, and obviously that's what I'll be presenting on today.
Okay, since we're talking about AI and how it's being used, what would you say? Because there's a lot of talk about how phishing, even phishing as emails have changed. We've gone from the days of the I'm a Nigerian prince to the emails with quite a few noticeable grammatical errors to there being fewer and fewer grammatical errors and people taking advantage of fonts and putting letters together, different letters together to look like other letters to make
Mhm.
addresses look the same and, just using urgency and stuff like that. What I've seen a lot, especially with, I wouldn't say seeing it, but with security awareness, a lot of the training I was trying to get people to recognize phishing emails minus the grammatical errors, noting that there's still urgency. And I think it is harder now for people to identify which is which. So are
Yeah.
you saying that you're not seeing those AI generated phishing emails, or they're just not as widespread as we're expecting yet, even though
I
we're
would
all
say
preparing for it?
the honest answer is it's kind of tough to say from a defender's perspective
Right.
whether it's
If
AI or
it's just a
not.
phishing email. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
But the level of sophistication in them is for sure going up. Because look, even if you're from some totally different country, you don't speak English, you don't need to, right? You're not going to have the grammatical errors anymore because you can just throw it into an LLM and it's going to look very, very customized. And I think what we're starting to see is just the scale of the customized attacks is growing so much because if you think about it, it's a pretty big time investment. If I'm a hacker and hey, I really want to target you, well, I'm going to need to do research on you, right? And I'm going to look at your LinkedIn, your socials, right? Look up your business, do all these types of things. You can create bots to just do that for you. And it may not be 1,000% perfect, but to be honest, it's going to be pretty darn good. And you can do that in an automated way at scale, then throw that into LLMs to be able to customize the attacks. So on the phishing side, we are definitely starting to see that. I wouldn't even say starting to see. I mean, over the past couple of years, we have seen a pretty big explosion in that.
I would say it goes further than just the phishing side. The phishing side is one angle, but that's where AI is really contributing to these cyber attacks, is more from a scalability perspective.
Yeah.
Being able to, that time to market of being able to get in before something that used to take you 7 days, now you can get in two. Right? It's hours now, it's not weeks anymore. It's minutes, not days. That's what the real edge that AI is providing, is to just do things a lot faster. And that means we as defenders also need to get faster. So they're getting in faster, they're getting the exploits delivered faster, they're covering the tracks faster. Everything is just that
At
much
a
quicker.
faster scale.
Mm.
You know?
Callan, do you want to add to that?
So as it pertains to the new level of threats that we're talking about, how how your companies um leveraging perhaps AI to to defend, etc. Or what are you doing in that space? Hope I'm not getting ahead of us, Sega.
Go for it.
Yeah, so from a Darktrace perspective, to be honest, I mean, how our business was founded and how our AI was developed, 13, 14 years ago, the whole concept of it was we can't predefine what bad's going to look like. right? We knew that a decade ago because bad is always changing. So with all these new types of attacks, to be honest, we're kind of fortunately in a very good position because that's how we find threats in the first place, right? Like our AI is just trying to learn what normal entails for a business. So if you get hit with a 0-day attack, right? To be clear, we're not going to necessarily know the name of that attack or if that's hit 1 or 1 million people, but we're going to be able to check that, hey, that's not normal for you as a business, right? For you as a user, for your device, right? So
Right.
in that way, we're, to be honest, pretty fortunately positioned.
Okay. Ricardo?
On our side, we're using it in a lot of the same way that criminals are using it, really, which is that scalability of being able to detect things a lot more with a lot more confidence and also faster. So we have kind of three, I don't want to get too much into the marketing terms, but we have three different AI pillars that we focus on, which is basically AI for protection, AI for assistance, and then actually securing the AI itself. Right. And just to break that down a little bit, AI protection is all about using AI to help you enhance your detection and protection capabilities. So things like detecting threats more with a higher confidence level, because if that threat comes out in a more sophisticated way, and it could be something just like, a simple phishing email that has all of the dressings of a legitimate email, no typos, nothing like what we would have seen back in the day, being able to
Right.
identify that versus being able to identify like a new strain of malware or a new 0-day attack. On the assist side, it's about helping um, the defenders to identify and get on top of these attacks at a much more rapid pace. Because here in our region, we also have this problem with people, where IT people kind of have like a rotation, especially in some countries. It's like maybe 10 companies share the same IT people and they just rotate in every few years. So you find that you're constantly training people, and the cyber attackers, they don't have to do that, right?
Yeah.
So how do you keep up? And AI is sort of a way to kind of accelerate that learning curve, right? And then secure AI in terms of actually securing the way that AI is being used within an organization at a foundational level. Because there's situations where, why am I gonna hack into a bank vault if I can just hack the person with the keys to the vault? Right?
Okay.
Exactly right.
Work smarter, not harder.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Tsega, can we take a step back and perhaps have Joe and Ricardo tell us a little bit about their companies and what they offer
Actually,
in the
they're going
security
to do that.
space?
They both have something that they're doing in
Oh,
here.
that's right. They do. They do.
Check the
I
chat.
apologize.
Check the chat.
Right. And I read it earlier, Sega, but
All
as we
right.
were going along and talking, it just hit me that okay.
So there's always this common, I always feel it's a misconception that we here in the Caribbean don't face the same level of threats or the same type of threats that our bigger counterparts do. So you guys see things. What do you think? Is that correct? Is it kind of, sort of? Is it that, hey, because I feel personally, I've used stuff and I talk to other people in the industry and I feel like we have the same struggles, the same woes.
I think you
I,
definitely have the same ones. I mean, when you think about it from a hacker perspective, like you said earlier, like work smarter, not harder, right? And if you know that the US, just take an example, the US security team's budgets are going to be, X amount bigger than a Caribbean budget, it's probably going to be a lot harder to hack into there. Now, admittedly, maybe the financial gain could be higher there too, but you know, if you could get a quote easier in, right, to some company in the region, to be honest, if I were them, I'd probably do that too, right? And unfortunately, as there are more headlines of more larger breaches in the regions, I, I mean, I see this very, very commonly. There'll be some big headline about, company XYZ being hacked in insert your country here in the region, and then more to follow, right? Because once they have success there, it could be that same hacking group. It could be others just trying to piggyback off of that, right? So it might not be the biggest country ever, but if they see that, yeah, it can be successful here, again, why wouldn't you go after it again?
I think the Caribbean sits on a lot. I mean, we have Cayman that's big in finance. I mean, we finance is still one of our top industries.
Mhm.
So if not, why not? I mean, sometimes I tell them I think they look at the Caribbean as a nice ground to just test some things out. Like we don't need to perfect it yet, but let's just see how this can work. And then, there's a lot of big talk around digitalization now. Like you said, everybody's trying to go in the cloud, everybody wants ease of access. And so, um, how do you think that's going to impact us all? How does that impact the landscape, the threat surface, and all of that?
More digital equals bigger attack surface. It's literally just that simple. And I've come across this a lot of times where the most exposed you're going to be is when you're making changes, right? And to be honest, it doesn't even need to be a gigantic digitization push. It could just be, hey, switching out one system to another, right? But obviously, if it is a big digitization push, if you are moving from, maybe your team is very competent in on-prem stuff, and then you start to get into new technologies that maybe your team doesn't have full expertise in, obviously there are going to be some gaps. Now, I'm sure obviously in the long term, they'll be able to shore up those gaps, but first couple of days, first couple of weeks, first couple of months, right? That's really where you're, the biggest target because you are in the process. So obviously it's not going to be 1,000% perfect in the beginning. So yeah, I mean, it's that migration process, at least from what I've seen, is definitely been the biggest target.
All right,
Yeah.
Ricardo.
That's a good point he brought up, is that the most exposed you are is typically when you're making changes, and especially now with AI, right? Just helping to scale up these attacks, you just need to sort of do the attack once, and then have your AI tool replicate that at scale. So you find there's a lot of situations now where they just cast a wide net and whoever gets caught. So back in the day, I used to have that same opinion too, that the Caribbean is that same, testing ground, like a
Oh, that's
sandbox
what you
for
meant, because I
people
thought you meant
just.
to say that we don't get it like the others. I was like,
No, no, no. Even in some of my previous roles too, like I was dealing with problems, and it's like when I try to escalate and investigate these problems, am I the first person to see this problem? Or is nobody else in the world experiencing what I'm going through right now? That's how I felt a lot of the time. Right? It's like the Caribbean has problems that nobody else has in the world, and that was a very, skewed opinion. But now that I have a bigger view of things, it's just you cast a wide net, and whoever gets caught gets caught. So it's not like obviously the bigger companies, certain verticals, they might get people focused explicitly on them. But there's other people, because it's a global industry now, that are just, shooting, and whoever gets hit, right? And
Yes.
now you don't have to be exposed for, 7 days for somebody to finally, go through their process and break in. Now you can just be exposed for, a couple of hours or a shift change or something like that. And that's all the time they need.
oh wow, the window of exposure. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I always said that the more technologically advanced we become, the least secure we are. Simply because a lot of times, somewhere in the process, one, security always tends to be an afterthought. A lot of people do not build security in. So security is not in by design. And so we created a product and now someone said, oh, we should probably secure that. And so now you're trying to secure something that did not start on a secure foundation, which means there are gaps in there. But at least that keeps us gainfully employed, guys. Um, what do you think makes the Caribbean attractive to cyber criminals? And you know what? I'm gonna go different. I'm gonna start with Calnan to start. I know we have wonderful water and nice sandy beaches and some nice industries. But besides that, what do you think is looked when they see us and they say, oh, this is a good spot. Besides, like we kind of close to the US, so we should probably test them out.
Yeah, I think look at you as a target of opportunity. Look at the Caribbean as a target of opportunity. Probably figure, well, too sophisticated anyway, perhaps in cybersecurity. A lot of your a lot of the Caribbean's economies are based on finance and tourism. So yeah, again, more targets of opportunities. And then um how advanced, perhaps they look at us as not being that advanced when it comes to defending ourselves. And so yeah, I think all those things kind of make us a target of opportunity for for hackers or for the bad guys. Let's just call them that.
All right. Joe, you want to add?
Yeah, I would say at least what I've personally seen, and I would assume, obviously hackers are probably looking at this as well, is just the number of personnel and staff within IT security. I'm obviously comparing it to the US where I sit, but throughout the Caribbean, and it depends country by country, but it's much less, right? I mean, it's significantly less. So, I mean, if you just look at it as a simple, hey, how many folks do I have to beat here, right? Regardless of their skill level, if that number is less, right, in one country versus the other, again, right, if you're the hacker, you kind of have to go for the easiest option there. So I would say smaller budgets, generally speaking, for IT security, as well as less personnel in those roles.
Yeah.
Ricardo, do you want to add?
Yeah, I would say it's also the distribution. Like the Caribbean has it's a melting pot of different kinds of ecosystems, right? Like you have all of these islands very close together, but moving from one to the other, it's a very different environment you might land in, right? You have somewhere like the Bahamas where it's 19 islands separated by the ocean, versus something like Jamaica where everybody's in one spot. Cayman Islands where it's three different islands. You cut one of those islands off, suddenly it's a big deal for everybody, right? And these are the types of things that they get to play with when they're in the Caribbean.
Hey, as a Bahamian, I'm gonna have to correct you. We have 300 islands and Keys, although most of them are
Well,
not inhabited. Okay,
19
just in case
inhabited, I think.
someone from the Ministry of Tourism or a teacher come on me and see this and say, Tsega, you actually let him go and say no. Learning moment.
19 inhabited, I think, was the last
Yeah,
number.
19 inhabited. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's inhabited. But quite frankly, Sig, I think it's more like 2,500. They tell me the numbers I've
Yeah,
seen
in
in
school
terms
they
of
tell me it
islets
was
and keys.
300.
Yeah, you stick with 300. Yeah,
Even though when I was in school, Pluto was still a planet,
yeah.
Same,
and then y'all
same.
get upset one day and kick him out. Y'all can't be changing the rules after I did out of school. Whatever I learned in school is what it is.
Yeah. And I don't think I'm gonna visit 300 of them anyway, so
Hey, some of them, you just need a thingy. You just go by on a speedboat. Just.
yes.
All right. So, Joe, I know you prepared a nice little short presentation for us to show us what y'all at Darktrace to see about us here in the Caribbean. So we're gonna let you go with that. I just need to do a quick shout out to Gordon Nichols at Adsevero who hook us up.
Yep.
I'm not good at networking, but apparently I learned how to network for this webinar series. I think I did okay. So I'm going to just drop his contacts inside the chat for anyone who might be interested who don't know the company. But Adsevero is the local partner for Darktrace here, at least in the Bahamas.
Yep.
I feel like a couple other places, but definitely in the Bahamas. Go
Yep.
for it, Joe.
Excellent. Yeah, so let me pull up my screen here. Alrighty. So the way I'm going to kind of approach this presentation is, look, obviously everybody nowadays is talking about all the advancements in AI, all of kind of the latest and greatest, things on that front. So this is a presentation that I actually gave in both Trinidad and Jamaica a couple weeks ago, that I think just outlines where we as a company kind of see the attack space moving. So again, this is, frankly, it's less about defense per se, and it's more about what attacks currently and more realistically what they will look like in the future here. Real quick, just for some background on Darktrace, for those of you that aren't aware, we're a business founded back in 2013, where we're really kind of the first cybersecurity company to be founded based on the premise of AI. Obviously, everybody now is starting to incorporate it into their technologies, but right, we took a very different approach to it in the beginning stages. We have 10,000 customers globally. I've been helping support our Caribbean business for the past 7 or 8 years here, and we're proud to say we have about 250 customers throughout the islands. Right. So in terms of, I think I thought I was cute with the name here, 0D AI, so 0 day. But in terms of right? If a hacker has the option, and this is going to sound very obvious, but if a hacker has the option of using a 0 day or not, right? 9 out of 10 times, obviously they would without a second thought. Of course, the caveat there is, hey, maybe they want to wait for a bigger or better target. But again, 9 out of 10 times, obviously they will. And I think as this presentation kind of progresses, I'll kind of outline the main thesis is the prediction that in the future, 0 days will actually be the most common form of attack. Not necessarily attempt, but most common form of successful attack. So just read some quick stats here. In terms of the average time between discovery and patch, about 22 days. So to be clear, that's not the hacker discovering the 0 day, right? This is more so once it actually has been discovered by the defenders. So again, you still have 3 weeks worth of time for it to be exposed. Now, how long it actually takes the hacker to weaponize it, right? You can see some quick stats here, but very quickly, right? And that time to weaponization is going down significantly, right? I mean, if you think about it, if roughly a quarter of them are weaponizing it within a day, right? Very, very quick, right? They're getting right to the point with it. Average lifespan of a 0 day before public disclosure, 7 years. Now, you might be looking at this and say, well, why is it 7 years before disclosure if weaponization is just a couple of days? And I think the bigger concept here is that in the past, right, 0 days were like gold, right? They were not flying around everywhere. They were very much so used in the vast majority of cases for highly sophisticated, mostly nation state type attacks, right? And in those attacks, to be very clear, those that are getting attacked, they don't actually know that they're attacked, right? Oftentimes, it could be an advanced persistent threat, right? Basically just sitting in the background, a low and slow type of attack. Maybe they're stealing some data here and there. Maybe they're spying, or frankly, maybe they're just embedding themselves within the system for if and when in the future they do need to actually exploit. So again, just the fact that it takes roughly 22 days between discovery and patch, that doesn't mean that it's only 22 days from the actual discovery from the bad guy's side. This next point is going to be pretty obvious here, but obviously 0 day attacks are extremely difficult to detect, right? Even kind of leading traditional security tools, the answer is not that, hey, they won't catch any. It's just based off of the premise of their detection mechanism, which is, hey, has this thing been seen before? Right? Obviously, a 0 day hasn't been seen. Now, the good vendors out there are certainly doing smart things around trying to pick up on basically educated guesses on variances and differences of new types of attacks. So again, it's not a 0 catch rate, but it is a quite low one. This I thought was actually a very cool, it's a pretty obvious graph, but I think it's a pretty clear explanation of where the market is going, right? Very simply, right, as you guys can see, the number of vulnerabilities here is just growing exponentially. And actually, frankly, this is even a bit dated here because it just goes up to 2024. But a few, I think, key kind of comments on this slide here. So very obviously, in the world, there's an exponential growth in the number, and maybe not number is the right word, but in the amount of software that's written, right? Obviously, more software equals more potential holes, right? More potential vulnerabilities. And I think very obviously with the massive improvements in AI coding agents over the past, really only the past year or so, right? The amount of software that's going to be written is going to absolutely skyrocket. And frankly, it already has started. But again, very simple correlation, more software equals more potential vulnerabilities. And then one cool thing here is AI bug hunter, right? It actually, very simply, just an AI, bug hunter, as the name suggests, was the top spot on HackerOne's leaderboard. So it's not a potential future thing. It is a current thing where AI is absolutely the one that is leading in terms of finding vulnerabilities. Now, obviously, the AI bug hunter is a good guy doing it, right? But to think that the bad guys aren't also using that is, I would say, pretty naive. So big question is obviously, hey, well, okay, if it's going to be all this bad, right? Why haven't we all been compromised? So I want to kind of talk through what 0 days have traditionally been versus our prediction on kind of what they will be in the future. So the biggest thing here is, again, 0 days are very difficult to find. right? You need advanced, sophisticated types of techniques. You need very highly skilled people to do a tremendous amount of research and work to find these, right? And frankly, you can see here 80%, the vast majority of these folks that are doing it, they're going towards nation state attacks, right? They're not some smash and grab ransomware job just to make a couple extra dollars, right? And so these types of attacks, again, like I mentioned earlier, they're going to be low and slow, they're going to be advanced and persistent, right? To maybe spy, to steal some small amounts of data here and there, and just be available for the final exploit if and when they need it. But I think part of the reason why a traditional organization or company isn't getting hit every day on this is kind of the second point here, where there's a robust ecosystem and marketplace for the buying and selling of 0 days. Right. And you can see from the price tags here, they're not cheap, right? Because again, it is so difficult to find these. There are full companies out there that will just mine these and then sell them to the highest bidder, right? So are there some hacking groups that can afford this? To be clear, yes, absolutely, right? But your traditional 1, 2, 3 people sitting in a basement trying to make some money, right? They're not necessarily going to be finding those, right? Or not even finding those, but going to be able to afford those. So again, in the past, it has much more been kind of nation state types folks that are leveraging them. But obviously nowadays things are definitely changing. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the current state of the AI labs and the different LLMs and kind of the advancement that they've had. I follow this very, very closely because frankly, I just think it's interesting from an economics perspective. But all these AI labs, right, they found this unbelievable technology with LLMs, but really to monetize it, right, the very obvious clear use case has been coding. Right? Software is a gigantic industry. They realized very quickly, hey, if we put all our eggs in the basket of trying to build AI coding, it's going to make them a tremendous amount of money. Obviously, that's what Claude Code does. That's what Codex from OpenAI does, et cetera, et cetera. And so actually with Anthropic's kind of big news of the Mythos model, right? Basically them holding back this new advanced model because they're claiming that it actually has exposed so many different 0 days. And frankly, they don't want to put that in the wrong hands. I think there's a few comments to be made on that. And frankly, 2 things can be true at once. 1, they're being honest, but 2, that's a hell of a good marketing strategy. So to be clear, I do think they are accurate. But again, I do think that's a very good marketing strategy as well to say, hey, we're so advanced. We don't want to put it in the wrong hands. But look, on the honesty point, like I've started to use coding tools. I have no coding experience at all, and I code all the time now, right? I've even in my coding agents and projects that I work on, I was able to, again, with no experience, I was able to make agents that go do the quality management and quality control and actually find what potential bugs there could be, right? Now, obviously, I haven't used it for hacking, but to be able to say, if somebody even has a semblance of expertise in this, to be able to say that they can't go out there and do that in an automated way, I think is crazy. Of course they can. Right? And frankly, it doesn't need to necessarily be the latest and greatest frontier model to do that, right? This technology is out there. I think just the latest and greatest frontier model will allow these people to do it that much quicker. But again, it is out there. Now, a couple of points I think that are reassuring on the kind of frontier labs and how they're addressing safety. So to be very clear, right, they understand obviously that this is a threat. Right? They understand that they don't want this to be in the wrong people's hands. So just like Anthropic has done, right? They've held back the release of Mythos for a bit. And they're actually just recently they've put some safeguards within there to, for example, like if you're trying to do a bioweapon or something, right? They look at your, they look at your prompts and they're going to throttle you and basically not allow you to do malicious things with it, which is great. But I think there are a few very obvious points to be made there. One is it certainly can be tricked, right? So if I am a hacker, right, of course, if I say, hey, I want to hack insert company, tell me how to do that. Yeah, of course, it's going to throttle you down there and not allow you to do that. But I can't imagine that a smart person who's persistent can't position it in a slightly different way to get around it. Hey, I'm a security researcher trying to defend this company. What are the gaps that I have, right? Whatever it may be. And then, frankly, I think the more relevant thing to mention here is, you have your frontier models up here at the top, but then right below them, you have open source models, right? And with the frontier model, look, if I'm a hacker, why would I be going to a cloud? Why would I be exposing all my bad stuff that I'm doing to a frontier model in the cloud where they have my data, right? And they definitely have your data. Whereas if I could just download, right, a local model, open source on my machine, not expose it, right, or at least expose it in a very kind of shadowed way where it doesn't clearly know who I am, that's obviously what they would do. So yeah, by all means, it's going to be a lesser model than the frontier, but they're both increasing, right? So, that Mythos model, sure, it might take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is for that open source to get up to it, but they're certainly going to get up to that, right? So I wouldn't put our eggs in the basket of, the open AIs and the Anthropics are going to be able to save us, because even if they do, again, there will be open source models that hackers can leverage. So I kind of alluded to this at the beginning here, but really the prediction from our side is we honestly think it's inevitable that, well, I wouldn't say inevitable. We think it's inevitable that the hackers will be using AI to leverage zero-day attacks at scale. But the prediction that we have is, frankly, the majority of attacks in the future, whether that's in 3 months, 3 years, whatever it may be, will actually be zero-day based attacks. Again, there will still be a gigantic amount of old school kind of not zero-day attacks that are attempted, but those that actually are successful, yeah, we would make the argument that we think there's going to be a strong case that the majority of those will be 0 days. And then I think to Ricardo's point earlier, right, it's not going to just be, hey, AI for the 0 day, right? The bad guys are going to be able to piece those together to frankly do as much, if not all of the kill chain in an automated way, right? Not just weaponizing that 0 day and then saying, okay, great, now I'm in. Now I need to manually get on the keyboard and do certain things. No. Of course, they're going to build out a full chain of how can I do this? So in split seconds or in minutes or in hours, right, I can fully expose this. Now, obviously that kind of introduces, okay, well, what do you do about it, right? How do you go to defend yourselves against these types of threats? So I think there's kind of three general, there's more AI than these three categories, but these are kind of three general ways to think about it, right? And how they can potentially protect you, right? So the generative AI and LLMs, right? It's not a huge defense use case yet. I would say for a lot of security companies out there, security vendors, right? They'll start to use it to augment how you use their tool, right? So a chatbot within the system, right? Basically automated guidance on, hey, you should do this next and that next, right? But it's not necessarily targeting identifying 0 days, right? So useful for sure, but not necessarily in the 0 day category. Then the attacker centric, which is basically supervised machine learning, are the vendors out there that, I'm oversimplifying a bit, obviously, but the vendors that that have a gigantic database of all of the latest and greatest threats, right? They're updating their signatures, their blacklists, everything like that as fast as they possibly can, right? And then they're trying to learn based off of that. Hey, right, what actually does bad look like? Right, let's protect against that. And then obviously start to learn basic variations off of the pre-existing threats to be able to make a best guess at what bad may look like in the future. So admittedly, that's going to be a lot better than the first column. So there's going to be some protection, right? But only for variations and variants that are somewhat similar to what's been seen before. But the true way to actually have a defense in-depth strategy to identify 0 days from the start is to more so leverage a business-centric approach for AI. Meaning, very simply, have an AI that can learn in-depth, nuanced of what is normal for my business, for my organization, for my users, devices, and my overall processes, right? Because if you have an AI defense system that can understand that, if you then get hit by a 0 day, right, to be clear, it's going to be unusual for you, right? No attack is going to be normal business operation. So that defense system may not necessarily know the name of the attack, may not necessarily know, right, whether one person or a million people have been hit before with it, but it's going to certainly be able to pick up on the fact that this is strange activity, right? This is unusual, right? Something is going on here. Very obviously, that's where Darktrace sits, right? That's kind of our whole model and our whole threat detection mechanism that we've utilized for over a decade here. And I do like this kind of final line here, which, it is worth kind of reiterating, where while every anomaly isn't an attack, right? Every attack does create an anomaly, right? So that core kind of behavioral approach of figuring out what normal versus abnormal actually entails for you. So the second half of this presentation, I kind of want to switch from, excuse me, what the attackers are using in terms of AI now into how your internal usage of AI can potentially have gaps, can be weaponized, and how you can actually better protect against it. So your internal usage of your Claudes, your open AIs, all those types of things. The obvious part here is, and I think, Tsega, you mentioned this earlier, right? More technology means, more potential exposure, right? These AI labs are fighting tooth and nail to have the most advanced this and the most advanced that. It is the biggest money-making opportunity of all time here, right? The revenues that these guys are bringing in is insane. So obviously they are competing vigorously with each other to be who a company goes with, right? From a functionality standpoint, from a technology standpoint. Of course, security has a part to play, but that's not the core use case. That's not the core thing that they are selling, right? So it introduces a tremendous amount of more risk, right? So ultimately, generative AI, based systems behave unpredictably, right? Like that's how they're designed to be useful, right? They don't follow fixed rules, right? They generate responses dynamically based on context, probability, prior interactions, right? So even the same prompt can produce different outcomes over time, right? And that's how conversations evolve. That's how more complexity evolves. So a simple guardrail isn't necessarily going to be able to, going to be able to protect you against all future use cases with it. Right? Human permissions with no human judgment. And I already mentioned this, but the AI behavior kind of drifts constantly here. I'm sure we've all seen, different parts of these types of reports where, whether it is a legitimate employee trying to use AI in a legitimate way, but that AI, for lack of a better term, kind of creates a mind of its own and unfortunately does things that was not the intention, basically in a not malicious use case, but just an improper use of AI that leads to agents deleting mass things, doing things that it really shouldn't be doing, right? There's a bunch of those out there. But then also on the malicious side, things like prompt injection, right? And I think this is where, from a defense standpoint, right, there's a lot to be kind of desired here, right? I don't think the defense systems are up to date on this as much. Where, give a simple example here, right? Let's say you start to use an AI agent for customer support, right? Maybe you have an inbox where customers send questions, or maybe you have a website where people put in forms to give feedback or something, right? And you develop an AI agent to be able to assist with that. Great use case, right? It's awesome for business. You don't need to have manual people looking at every single one. But the new risk now is hackers, excuse me, hackers can start to manipulate their replies, whether it's in an email or a form online or something, just with plain text, right? They can do a prompt injection, right? So they send that email in there, and in the email, it'll have something that will actually tell the agent or instruct the agent to do something. And again, I mean, if you have AI agents doing your customer support, just as a simple example, the whole use case is, hey, you don't have to have people manually reviewing every single one, right? There's no malicious link. There's no malicious attachment. It's just words, right? And if the AI is not set up in the proper way, or frankly, even if the hacker's just quite creative with how it operates, right? It's very difficult for the AI to properly distinguish between what's data and what's a potential prompt injection, right? So that's a huge type of use case that we're already starting to see. And, a few of these attacks have definitely already seen that. I think this slide, to be honest, I think there's a lot of similarities between this concept of guardrails with AI as there is with the whole adoption of cloud, right? And I alluded to this earlier, but very obviously, yes, the Anthropics, the OpenAIs, all those types of companies, they're absolutely going to have a tremendous amount of guardrails and a tremendous amount of security built into their offerings, right? Just as the cloud providers of, the past generation have done so as well. But there is an onus on the end user, right? On you as the customer, to be able to have something over and above that, right? It's not enough to just have these simple guardrails because, again, like prompts adapt, right? Behaviors change, right? And controls can certainly be bypassed over time, right? It's the whole concept of, hey, a static rule just in the traditional security model. Yeah, obviously that's a great starting point. You certainly need those, right? But an advanced attack can absolutely get around that. And frankly, like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't necessarily even need to be a malicious attack. It could just be misuse of AI internally. And not in a malicious way, somebody honestly just trying to do their job to use AI, to be more effective. But hey, maybe they prompt the wrong thing, or maybe they're doing so much coding where they're not reviewing it and they don't realize that it has drifted, which I can absolutely tell you from firsthand experience that happens. And no, I'm not looking through every single line of code. So it certainly is quite possible there. Not to make a product pitch here, but obviously this is a huge gap. This is where Darktrace is absolutely, putting our eggs in that basket, right? We absolutely want to be able to be able to provide that type of securing AI architecture and systems for organizations. And like I said at the beginning, I think we're very well positioned to do that, right? We have over a decade of behavioral anomaly detection, right? We are really built for changes, right? Behavioral changes, unusual activities. And I think probably the bigger concept here, whether you look at Darktrace or something else, I think the bigger concept here is with AI agents, it's not going to just be siloed in one environment, right? I mean, for companies that are truly adopting AI and frankly, to get the most out of it, it has to be cross-platform, right? It has to be able to interact within different systems, different environments across different users for it to truly be, frankly, just business effective. So just to have a system that can look across multiple different environments, that can actually, right, piece together, hey, this thing started over here, but now it's touching this, and now it's moving over to that environment, which again, that's, obviously how Darktrace has been built over the years. So this view, yes, obviously this is how Darktrace is viewing it, but to be honest, for any, sorry, I keep clicking the wrong buttons here. But for I think any organization looking at how to secure AI, I think it is important to just kind of get, again, whether it's this exact model or a slightly different one, right? I think there's a few different aspects of what you want to be looking for. In the top right, shadow AI, right? I think this is from my initial conversations with the customers, I think this is actually the first thing that they're concerned about is what are my users actually using? Right? Hey, maybe you have a corporate Copilot license, right? And that's authorized and there's some guardrails around that. Okay, great. But do you know what else folks are using, right? Is somebody using an open source model locally? Is somebody using a different, maybe not even a bad necessarily AI model, but are they just using one that we don't have visibility into, right? So just creating policy and being able to actually see what is being used, when that policy is being broken, et cetera. But then probably the biggest thing here is in the top left, right? Monitoring the actual prompts, right? Because let's say you do have that enterprise license for insert your AI product here, right? How are your users actually using it, right? Is somebody in sales trying to prompt it to ask for everybody else's, simple example, but everybody else's salary, right? Obviously, you don't want that happening, right? Is it somebody that's uploading data that absolutely is confidential that should not be going into there, right? That's kind of the internal, let's say kind of the insider threat use case. But then to the point I made earlier about prompt injection, right? Do you have visibility into actually what are the literal prompts that are going in here, right? Where did it go wrong? How can we stop that before it actually occurs? As well as, I think identities, this is a huge thing in the industry, but, identities obviously years ago were built for actual humans. But nowadays, right, so many AI agents are getting their own identities, are getting their own like licenses for different software as a service applications, right? They're getting their own basically keys. So being able to monitor those different AI agents as their own individual and adapting identities, and being able to make sure that they are playing within the bounds that you guys define for them. As well as just at a high level, just evaluate your overall risk level, right? How you're rolling things out. Is that abiding by the rules and the policies that you set out? Where are you more exposed? Obviously, within security, right? It's not to block everything, but it's just to be aware of what is the risk level, right? Are we comfortable with this level of risk for this potential business benefit? So yeah, I would say, and certainly Darktrace is not the only company that's doing this, but I think the huge frontier here is everybody's now starting to use AI agents and AI applications. Do you have do you have protection against that, right? Do you have certain technologies that can actually monitor what's being used, help you guys enforce policy, help you have that confidence that, hey, if something does go wrong, do you have AI fighting back against AI to be able to stop things in real time? So yeah, thank you very much. This was hopefully a useful session for you guys.
All right. Well, that was okay. First off, you want the HR people, you want there to be guardrails, but you want them to understand that guardrails ain't enough. You asking a lot, Just asking a lot. But that goes into governance, AI governance, which is a completely different topic. So let's look at sectors most at risk. Ricardo, what do you think is what the data? What does the data tell you is probably one of the top two most vulnerable, and why?
So one of the most vulnerable that I personally have seen over the last year or so is all of these critical infrastructure sectors. Things like utility companies, communications companies, public services, things that, a lot of people start making noise when it goes down, right? For example, you have an attack on the power company in an island, and all of a sudden the whole island is out of power. That's something that people, get nervous about. People start to phone calls in the night. Money starts moving very quickly when a situation like that happens. So that's a very good motivation for cyber criminals to go after industries like this. And we've honestly seen it happen. There have been a couple of situations throughout the Caribbean, not just in the last year, but over a period of several years, where they shut down services like that, utility services, government services, and people can't get things done. Old people can't get their social security, right? These are serious situations that can ultimately lead to loss of life, people getting sick, having like real physical consequences, right? So that's, I would say, one of the top at-risk industries, because a lot of the times they're using like out-of-date infrastructure. They don't have the same regulations that they need to adhere to. Like you touched on this a bit earlier in the call when you mentioned that, financial services, they're a regulated industry. So they have to have certain things in place before they're even allowed to do business. It's not the same for other industries, right? Especially in the government services slash critical infrastructure area, right?
Calnan, imagine being in times where you may be without electricity for a few hours in darkness.
Yeah, I've never had any experience with that.
Never ever,
No.
never ever have I in the Bahamas ever experienced those type of outages. Knock on wood.
Except for last Sunday. Yeah. Okay.
I would go and make these vague statements, right? And my calendar just going straight in on the people. My calendar, I just say never ever have we. But that is good. That is good. It's something you highlighted on the difference between a highly regulated industry and the rest of us. Joe, what are you saying? What about healthcare? I always felt that people were so wild when they started targeting healthcare. I'm like, what? Have you no compassion, no soul?
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, I'll just echo what Ricardo said. I think the critical infrastructure is the most obvious that we're seeing. And it's actually, I would say, somewhat similar in the healthcare space as well, because it's more so just about legacy systems that are being used, right? Certain IoT devices, certain OT systems that depending on the organization, these things could have been around for decades, right? Not up to date, not the most kind of latest and greatest type of software that's running. So because it's so old, there are so many different vulnerabilities, such an easy way in. Um, on the healthcare front, sorry, not to laugh, but on the healthcare front, I had the same reaction whenever I see those types of hacks. Apparently, much of the time, apparently, these actors don't necessarily know who they're actually targeting because to be honest, so much of their attacks is so much kind of spray and pray, where they're really just hitting on anybody that they possibly can, and if they get lucky and get in one, great, they'll go for it. And I don't think they always necessarily know. It's not so targeted as, hey, we're going to attack this hospital. It's just we're going to attack anything that we can ping, right? So that's their defense. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'd like to at least hope that that is.
I have some dark humor. So just imagine for a minute, right? You, the attacker, spraying, you praying, right? And you end up hitting a healthcare institution.
Hmm.
And then someone you care about end up having to go there.
Hmm.
That's just wild. But I digress. I digress.
Mhm.
So we're going to talk about the road ahead. We all know, hold on, I gotta go back 1 second. Both of you talked about legacy systems. Calnan, we still playing Never Have I Ever? Never have I ever worked for an institution that had legacy systems. I just want to throw that out there. Because those things, those are myths. Y'all just say that. Why are they legacy? When you turn them on, do they not come on? Do they not work? So what? They're lacking a little support. What's a support in the grand scale of things? You just want me to throw away a perfectly good, usable device because Microsoft don't want to support it no more. Anyway, so building resilience versus chasing threats, every threat, because like you said, there's a lot of them out of there. And although they are the same at the core, because like you said, there's a lot of ATPs, there's a lot of phishing, there is a lot of things that use core principles of malware, and they just became more sophisticated. They upgraded it. They graduated from primary school and they all up in college now. So if you could give any advice to a CEO or CIO or the entire C-suite on the 2 areas they could fund this year in the upcoming 12 months that would help them mitigate their threats, what would it be?
So, who's that question for? That's one for us, right?
Both of y'all, whoever say. Ding, ding, ding. Ricardo caught the buzzer first.
Oh yeah, all right, cool. So there's just a few notes that you hit just now where it's serious. I mean, you said it like a joke, but it's serious, right? And those are real issues that we face in the Caribbean, where if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? That's the mentality that we have, because is a real headache. Imagine you run in a hospital and you hear, oh, we have to change out all of these X-ray machines. We have to change out all of these ECGs, all of the stuff that we're using. We need to change out all of it because it's outdated.
Okay? And
That's a
they only
real
cost
headache.
$10 a pop.
Exactly. And that's just 10 is a modest estimate, right? But is a real headache for the people in charge to do that. So a lot of the time you find the mindset is like, listen, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the problem is that there's no contingencies that are coming into place. Like, okay, we're not gonna fix it. What else are we gonna do? Right? Is there something else that we can do if we can't change out all of these machines, or if we can't go with the best solution? What can we do to improve our security posture? And a lot of the times it's really just, cross your fingers, go to church on Sunday and make sure you put a little thing in the prayer about the system that we we have, right? Um, so, and in a lot of these cases, the system security is not built in; it's bolted on, right? And that's sort of where AI came from. Like, remember when AI was just getting popular, you could do anything you want with it, and it's when people started exposing it and saying, "Hey, AI told me this," and all of these different cases started popping up. Then it's like, okay, well, how do we make this thing secure? And that's when this whole push for guardrails started coming in, and all of the different transformations that we've seen today. So I think in my opinion, the name of the game is visibility. You have to know, right? And I think that's an area that we're severely lacking in our region right now, is that we don't have visibility. And Joe touched on some of this in his presentation in terms of things like shadow AI and how people are using it. Like, yeah, maybe you have your corporate Copilot license, but you have somebody in HR sitting there who don't like Copilot. They want to use ChatGPT, right? What are they doing with it? Can you see, right? And if you can't see, then you really don't have any idea what to do, right? If you're even, doing something is the next problem. But the first thing is knowing, right? Because if you don't know that it's happening, that's a problem you can't fix. So I think that's where a lot of the investment has to come in terms of gaining visibility into the things that are happening. And then you'll be able to prioritize based on the visibility that you do have, right? And then the other thing is that scalability and that automation in terms of being able, like, okay, we know it's happening. How quickly can we respond to it? If somebody sends, a confidential proposal to ChatGPT, what do we do? What's our next step? We just throw our hands up in the air and walk out and go to sleep or something because we can't take the stress. What's the next move? Right. So I think visibility and response, having a plan, first of all, is what needs to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would, again, probably echo exactly what you're saying. I would slightly not change, but I would say on the response piece, honestly, we'd all love to just say, hey, we're going to build the biggest walls and nothing ever comes in. I think at this stage, you really need to plan for something will get it, right?
Yeah.
And I think to Ricardo's point, you need to really, really invest in not just a human process of what do I do when the bad thing's there, but also in the technology, the security side, like, do we have mechanisms that can kick in on our behalf, isolate and block stuff? Right? Can we be alerted in real time that, hey, whatever, this malware came in, but it was blocked here and there, right? Or this user was trying to do X, Y, and Z in this different application, and we've blocked it, right? So I think the response is by far and away the biggest thing, because there's just no chance that you can stop everything from getting in the front door.
All right. Well, Ricardo, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know you have something to share with us concerning the road ahead and how Fortinet could help us get there a little bit.
Oh, well, I was gonna skip it because I think we're probably out of time, but let me actually just drop this in the chat so that everybody has it. Uh, so basically what I had to show was around the threat report. Every half of the year or every year, Fortinet releases the global threat landscape report, which just kind of summarizes, what we're seeing, what the trends are, how is it changing from the previous year, and what do we see going forward. So a lot of what I had was pretty much around that. I don't know how much of it I'm gonna get through, but let me share my screen. So, okay. Okay. So just to run through real quick, what does the reality check look like? We kind of touched on. I'm not going to spend too much time with the presentation because we touched on a lot of these points at different points during the session. But it's a business, right? Cybercrime is a business. So a lot of times you touched on the point about people hacking a hospital. A lot of the times the same people that gain access, first break into that hospital are not the same people that do the hacking, right? They would just hack in and sell that access to somebody else who does want to exploit it, right? And another point is that a lot of times the exploitation is optional, right? Ransomware is not a must. Sometimes it could just be something as simple as, oh, they want to use your resources for crypto mining, right? They want to have some stealth programs in place that you can't even see, right? So looking at the stats for the previous year, we have about 640 billion reconnaissance events globally, 121, let's call it 122 billion exploitation attempts, which is up 25% from the previous year. Almost 5 billion stealer logs, because credentials, like I think Joe touched on this earlier, credentials, identity is the new parameter, right? So a lot of times it's not about brute forcing or stealing anything anymore. It's just about using live credentials to get in. And then plus 700, almost 8,000 confirmed ransomware victims, which is up 400% from 2024, right? So one of the points that we wanted to make with this is that security advantage is now defined by how fast you're able to respond, not the breed of tools that you have, not how many tools you have, because a lot of the times the orchestration slows you down, right? So when the attacks are AI powered and they're scaling that much faster, we have to move faster as well because we can't let them have that time to live in our environment. Talking about the weaponization of it now, looking at attackers might start with what they already have, right? So they might say, okay, well, I have Jim's machine over here that's compromised. Jim has some integrations with these other systems. Maybe I can use that to get into those systems, right? And then that's how the attack surface is expanding because the more digitized we get, the more integrations that come in, the more the cloud becomes a thing, and now we have to integrate these different AI agents that have all of these different permissions to these different systems. That's more and more exposure that we're just piling up on top of each other, right? So it's not just about what you can see, but it's all of the things that are happening behind the scenes. And that's why I mentioned earlier that visibility is the name of the game because you need to be able to detect that stuff, and then you can have a plan for what you're going to do with it. Mm. So again, risk is not defined by vulnerabilities anymore, right? Because those vulnerabilities can change. It's about behaviors. It's about understanding what is happening in the environment, right? And the faster the attackers can be, because remember, the attackers, they don't have to go through change advisory board. They don't have to test things. They don't have to make sure that they're not going to break anything. They can just run with whatever they want to try, right? So we are inherently at a disadvantage because we do have to think about these things. We do have to make sure that whatever we're putting in isn't going to break and cost our business money. And again, exploits are increasing. Traditional timelines are shrinking, so we have less and less time to respond. It's not a matter of preventing every single attack. It's just being able to respond to it, to be able to identify that something has happened, and be able to respond to it, right? And then post-exploitation side, so we had almost 8 billion C2C botnet detections for the last year, which that math works it out to about 20 million a day. And there's a live threat mapper that you can see on our website. This is mostly just optics, but I like to show it because it looks cool. Let me put it up. There we go. So yeah, just looking at the last
I
7
see my
days.
flag, Calnan. I see my flag. I'm excited now. Hey, you didn't get the aquamarine, but I guess the grain is close enough.
I don't even think those assets are ours. We're probably hooking with some database that needs to update the flag and then feeds it over to us. But this is just like and this is purely from our telemetry. So this isn't even the full picture, right? Because this is looking at Fortinet's systems and what we're seeing. But there's other vendors out there that are in use that they might be seeing something different, right? But these are just some of the top threats that we've seen in the last 7 days. And if you look at these numbers, that's over 1,000, right, in a week. So it's real, it's happening, and it's moving from a state where it's not about projects anymore. It's a continuous state of cybercrime activity, right? So yeah, let me not just go through the whole report, but let me just say that it's all of this is really reinforcing the point that visibility is the main thing that you need to have, and you need to have plans in place. You need to have architectures, right? That should be the name of the game now in terms of it's not just about having all of these different tools and solutions, because at the end of the day, you're going to need people to manage those tools and solutions, and it creates complexity that cannot scale as you and your business grow, right? So it's not about thinking, oh, okay, who has the best firewall, who has the best software, who has the best email security. It's about creating an architecture that can give you that layered coverage and scale with you. And that's why, like, from a Fortinet perspective, that's something we've been focused on for the last 26 years. We've been very heavily invested on things like integration. And our CEO, he foresaw the marriage of networking and security before it ever happened. Right? If you think back to 20, 25 years ago, we in the Caribbean were a bit different. So we kind of had jacks of all trades in the IT team. You had one guy doing, email, firewall, networking, and everything was kind of, a mix between a mix of responsibilities. But now we're getting into a place where we're more siloed, and the networking team don't talk to the security team, especially in some of those bigger organizations. But it can't work like that, right? Because that's not scalable. And that creates gaps in visibility that we're not going to be able to manage once we start going to, this is just 2026. 2030 is going to be something else, right? There's going to be more attacks. There's going to be stuff that we haven't seen yet. On the AI side, we don't even really know what's coming, right? Because it's constantly evolving. So think about, that's the one message that I would leave you guys with. Think about how you're going to create an architecture that can protect yourself, independent of what products you're putting into it. How you're going to create something that works for the business, how you're going to create something that scales. Yeah. I'm going to just close it there. I don't want to go through the whole thing because we're already over time.
Ricardo is being nice, unlike me and Callan, who wasn't quite grasp keeping this show under an hour yet. We can try again next time. Well, just like that, we have come to the end of episode 4. Callan, you have any words, pearls of wisdom to leave us with tonight?
No, but gentlemen, this is thank you so very much for your input. And again, our message in this particular episode was about framing it so that the people within our country and within our region understand that just because we're small and we're out there, it doesn't mean that we're not being looked at, we're not being scanned, and we're not at risk. That it's the bad guys equal opportunity when it comes to wanting to impact your systems, to take your data, to et cetera, et cetera. So thank you so very much for the perspective.
All right, Joe, do you have any last words for us?
No, just appreciate the opportunity. Always happy to present on this stuff. So thank you very much.
Okay, what about you, Ricardo?
Likewise, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I did watch some of the previous episodes, so I had an idea of how this was going to go, and I'm excited to see what you guys come up with going forward.
All right. So before I go, I'm going to remind everyone that I networked for this episode. And so we have Adsevero and Gordon Nichols, the partner / reseller for Darktrace. And then we have Lanza Miller at CoLab Consultants, who is the reseller / partner for Fortinet. I have dropped their contacts in the chat, just in case you guys want to check them out. You never know when you may need them. You may have some legacy systems, that don't really exist, but may actually exist for you somewhere. You may want to talk about guardrails some more with Joe, or talk to Ricardo, because Ricardo doing a lot of praying. The people spraying and praying, and then he have them praying when it comes for incidents. So Ricardo is the man if you need some prayers. With that, we will wrap up tonight's episode. Thank you so much for not just joining us, but for sticking with us for the additional 14 minutes. I hope you join us again next time. When did I upload this, Calnan? What is July 7th?
It's July 7th.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about data. Yep.
Oh, yeah, we're talking about data protection. All right. Have a good night, all. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night. Thank you.